Xander stood on the observation deck of the old space station, gazing out into the endless void. The hum of the ship's engines was barely audible, a faint buzz in the background as he leaned against the cold metal railing. The station itself was a relic, built long before the war began, but it was still standing strong, just like humanity. Not yet. The war with the alien factions had taken a heavy toll. Entire colonies had been wiped out, cities decimated, and fleets lost in space. Still, Xander wasn't ready to give up. He had seen humanity face impossible odds before and come out on top. And today was no different. The Zornax delegation had arrived. The air on the station had grown tense the moment the ship's large form appeared on the radar. Its sleek design, intimidating, even from a distance. The Zornax were known across the galaxy for their power and advanced technology. They had a reputation for being ruthless conquerors, but they also understood the importance of diplomacy when it suited their needs. Today's meeting was supposed to be a peaceful negotiation, an attempt to secure a temporary truce in the ongoing war. But Xander had seen enough in his time to know that peace was rarely permanent. A Zornax emissary would be arriving soon, and everyone aboard the station knew who it was: Queen Jelana. She was a towering woman with skin the color of deep crimson and eyes that glowed like molten lava. She was one of the highest-ranking officials of the Zornax and had a reputation for cruelty. Her presence alone was enough to make even the bravest soldiers uneasy. Xander had no love for the Zornax. They had invaded Earth, wiping out entire cities in a matter of hours. The people of Earth were resilient, though, and they fought back. But the Zornax were not just powerful. They were arrogant. They believed that they were the galaxy's true rulers, that they were above everyone else. That was something Xander couldn't stand. The doors to the meeting room slid open, and Xander straightened up. His team stood beside him, their faces grim but determined. They were here to keep the peace, but they all knew that it could fall apart at any moment. There was no telling what kind of game the Zornax were playing this time. Queen Jelana entered, flanked by two of her guards, massive beings in black armor, who looked ready to tear through anything in their path. Xander couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine as she stepped forward. She was a sight to behold, her tall frame exuding power and confidence. But Xander wasn't fooled. Beneath that imposing exterior was a woman who believed she was superior to everyone else, her eyes locked onto Xander's, and a cruel smile curled on her lips. "So, this is the great human resistance," she said, her voice smooth but filled with mockery.
I expected something more impressive.
We've managed to survive, haven't we? Her laughter echoed through the room like the sound of glass breaking. Survive?
You're nothing but a species on the brink of extinction. You can fight all you want, but it won't matter.
The Zornax are destined to rule, and nothing will stop us. Xander felt the anger rise in his chest, but he forced it down. The last thing he needed was to play into her hands. Instead, he crossed his arms and spoke calmly. "You're welcome to think that, but if you underestimate humanity, you'll regret it." Queen Jelana's smile widened, and she took a few steps forward, standing mere feet from him now. "Underestimate you?" she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You think you're anything more than a primitive species. Do you know how many times I've seen your kind struggle and fail? You humans are weak. You've built nothing compared to the civilizations of the galaxy. Your weapons are outdated." "Your technology is laughable." Xander clenched his fists but refused to be provoked. "Our strength isn't in our weapons or technology. It's in our will to survive. That's what makes us dangerous." The Zornax queen tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. But then she laughed again, louder this time. "What a charming delusion," I'll admit you've managed to hold on for longer than expected. But in the end, it's all meaningless. Your people will fall, and the Zornax will take their rightful place as rulers of this galaxy." Xander couldn't help but feel a deep frustration build inside him. The Zornax woman was so confident in her superiority, so sure of her race's dominance. But the truth was, they didn't understand humans at all. They didn't understand that Earth was a world that fought back. They didn't understand that humanity's strength came from its ability to adapt, to overcome, to rise from the ashes when it seemed impossible. Xander had seen it before, on Earth and in the countless battles he had fought.
The Zornax had power, yes. But they didn't have the one thing that made humans dangerous: resilience.
But it wasn't the time for a speech. Not yet. They were here to talk, not to fight. For now, he would have to play the game. The meeting dragged on for what felt like hours. Queen Jelana kept her mocking tone, talking down to everyone in the room, dismissing the idea that humans had any chance of winning the war. She spoke of Earth's inevitable downfall, the Zornax's conquest of the galaxy, and the birth of a new age where humans would be nothing more than a footnote in history. Xander listened patiently, his mind racing. He was trying to gather as much information as he could. Every word from the Queen was another piece of the puzzle, another clue about the Zornax's plans. The more she talked, the more he understood about their arrogance and about their blind spot. It was her mistake. She was so focused on mocking humanity that she didn't see how dangerous it was to underestimate them. Finally, the meeting came to an end, with no agreement reached.
Queen Jelana stood up, clearly pleased with herself for the damage she had done. "I think we're done here. Enjoy your fleeting moments of peace, humans," she said with a smirk. As she turned to leave, she stopped and looked back over her shoulder, her fiery gaze locking onto Xander's once again. "You may think you're something special," she said coldly, "but you're not. You're just another species, doomed to extinction." Xander stood tall and met her eyes with a calm, unwavering stare. "Maybe," he said softly, "but we're a species that survived against impossible odds before, and we'll do it again." With that, Queen Jelana's smirk faltered for just a moment. But it was enough. She turned and walked out of the room, her guards following behind her. The doors slid shut, leaving the humans alone in the silence. Xander exhaled deeply, his breath shaky but controlled. The words she had said still echoed in his mind, but he wouldn't let them consume him. He knew what the Zornax didn't. The human spirit wasn't something you could break with words alone. As he watched the doors close, he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning.
They had underestimated him before, and he was sure they would do it again. But he would make them pay for that mistake. The time for fighting would come, and when it did, humanity would prove to the galaxy that they were anything but weak. The tension in the air aboard the space station was thick. After the meeting with Queen Jelana, Xander and his team retreated to their quarters. The room was dimly lit, with only the faint hum of the station's systems filling the silence. Xander sat at a small table, his hands clasped together, his mind racing. It had been hours since the meeting ended, but the mocking words of the Zornax Queen still echoed in his mind. "You're just another species doomed to extinction." Those words had stung, not because they were true, but because they represented everything that had been wrong about the way the Zornax viewed humans. They underestimated them. They didn't understand what it meant to be human, what it meant to fight, to survive, against all odds. Xander stared out of the small window, his eyes tracing the distant stars. He had seen enough death, enough destruction, to know that peace was a fleeting thing. But the Zornax had made a mistake today. They had underestimated the human spirit, and it was a mistake they would pay for. As he sat lost in thought, a loud beep came from his communicator. Xander snapped out of his reverie and turned to the screen. It was a message from his commanding officer, Captain Mace.
He tapped the screen, bringing up the message. Xander, we've just received a distress signal. A human colony, Vega 7, has been attacked. We're not sure by whom, but the station's transmission lines had been cut off. We need you and your team to investigate immediately. We can't afford to wait any longer. Xander's heart sank. Vega 7 had been one of the last remaining peaceful colonies on the Outer Rim. If it was under attack, the situation was worse than he thought. He knew that if the Zornax were involved, it would be a bloodbath. They had been looking for an excuse to wipe out the remaining human settlements, and Vega 7 might have been the perfect target. Without wasting any time, Xander gathered his team. The urgency in the captain's voice left no room for hesitation. He gave his orders quickly, and the group moved in unison, preparing to board the transport ship that would take them to the colony. As they walked through the station's halls, the usual bustling activity was replaced with an eerie silence. The crew members they passed looked at them with concern, but no one spoke. The attack on Vega 7 had everyone on edge. Xander knew that their mission could very well be a one-way trip, but he wasn't going to back down. Not now. The transport ship, a sleek vessel designed for quick military operations, was waiting in the docking bay. Xander and his team boarded swiftly, strapping into their seats as the ship's engines roared to life. The station's gravity pulled at them as the ship accelerated out of the bay, heading straight for Vega 7. The flight was long, but it was quiet. The crew sat in silence, each person lost in their own thoughts, preparing for the worst. Xander couldn't stop thinking about Queen Jelana. The way she had spoken so confidently about humanity's impending fall. It angered him, but he knew that getting angry wouldn't help them now. He needed to stay focused. Vega 7 came into view after several hours of travel. It was a small colony, a few hundred people at most, but it had been a symbol of human perseverance. The colony had survived the early days of the war, and many had looked to it as a beacon of hope. If it was gone, it would be another crushing blow to human morale. As the transport ship approached the colony's orbit, the ship's communications system crackled to life. The captain's voice came through the speaker. Xander, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the colony. It's not just an attack, it's something else. Be ready for anything. Xander nodded. He could feel the tension in the air rise as the crew prepared for what lay ahead. The ship dropped into Vega 7's atmosphere, and as they got closer, the devastation became clear. Fires raged across the surface, and thick plumes of smoke rose into the sky. The colony was under siege. The transport ship landed on the outskirts of the colony. Xander and his team disembarked quickly, weapons at the ready. The ground was charred, and the smell of burning debris filled the air. There were no signs of life, at least none that they could see. The attack had happened quickly, and it was obvious that the colony was ill-prepared for the onslaught. They made their way through the ruins, cautiously stepping over fallen beams and twisted metal. It was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that only came after an overwhelming loss. Xander felt the weight of it all. The lives lost, the families torn apart. This wasn't just a battle. This was a statement from their enemies. We need to find survivors, Xander said, his voice low but firm. If there's anyone left, we'll get them out of here. His team nodded in agreement, and they continued their search, moving through the shattered streets. Xander's mind raced. Who would do this? The Zornax? Or perhaps one of the other factions that had aligned against him? Whoever it was, they had made a grave mistake. If this attack was the beginning of something larger, humanity would fight back. After several tense hours of searching, they found something. A small group of survivors had taken shelter in a nearby building. The group, mostly civilians, looked exhausted, hungry, and scared. But they were alive. Xander approached the group slowly, his voice calm as he spoke. We're here to help. We'll get you to safety
One of the survivors, a middle-aged man with a scar across his face, looked up at him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough.
"We're part of the human resistance. We're here to get you out of this place."
The man nodded, though there was doubt in his eyes. "I didn't think anyone was coming. We thought we were on our own."
You're not alone, Xander said firmly. You never will be.
Humanity doesn't give up. As Xander and his team helped the survivors to the transport ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The attack had been too sudden, too brutal. There was no warning, no signs of preparation. It felt like a message. Once everyone was aboard, Xander sent a signal to the captain, informing him that they had found survivors.
But something still gnawed at him.
The Zornax Queen's words echoed in his mind. "You're just another species, doomed to extinction." Xander clenched his fists. He knew better than anyone that humanity was far from doomed. They were survivors, and they would fight, no matter the cost. As the transport ship lifted off from the colony's surface, Xander looked out the window. The flames of Vega. But the fire of resistance burned brighter than ever. In his heart, the Zornax thought they could break humanity. They thought they could wipe them out, but they were wrong. And soon, they would find out just how wrong they were. The flight back to the space station was quiet, but the weight of the mission still hung heavy in the air.
The flames from Vega, 7 still lingered in Xander's mind. Their orange glow burned into his memory.
He had seen destruction before, but nothing like this. The Zornax had left nothing behind but ruin. Xander sat in his seat, staring out the window at the stars passing by. The transport ship hummed softly as it cut through space, the familiar sound of small comfort in the face of so much loss. The survivors they had rescued were all huddled in the back, trying to sleep, but Xander knew they wouldn't forget what they had seen. No one could. He wasn't sure how long they had been in space, maybe a few hours, or maybe longer. Time felt like it had lost meaning. Everything had become so surreal. Every moment since the attack felt stretched, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. The Zornax Queen had been right about one thing. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. But it wasn't from weakness. It was from the strength of their enemies, the cruelty that had been unleashed on them. Yet, Xander knew something the Zornax didn't understand. Humanity's strength didn't come from their weapons, their technology, or even their military might. It came from their refusal to give up, from the way they could endure when everything seemed lost. Xander's thoughts were interrupted when the ship's communication system buzzed to life. The captain's voice came through the speaker, steady, but filled with urgency.
"Xander, we've received some troubling news."
It's about the Zornax Queen. Xander straightened up.
"What about her?" "We've just intercepted a transmission. It seems the Queen is moving forward with something much bigger than we thought."
"She's assembling a fleet, an invasion force. She's planning to strike at Earth itself."
Xander felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had known the attack on Vega. 7 wasn't random. The Zornax had been testing their resolve, pushing the humans to the edge. But an invasion? Earth was humanity's last stronghold.
"If the Zornax could break through there, it would be over."
"Are we sure about this?" Xander asked, his voice tight.
"It's confirmed. They've started mobilizing and they're heading toward the Sol system. If we don't act fast, Earth won't have time to prepare."
Xander stood up, a sense of urgency filling him.
"I'll inform the survivors. We need to get back to the station now. We'll need every ship, every fighter we can muster."
The captain didn't say anything for a moment. Then, in a quieter voice, he added, "Xander, be careful. If the Queen is leading this attack, you're walking into the lion's den." Xander nodded. "I know. But this time, it's personal." The transmission cut off, and Xander turned to his team. They were gathered around the room, waiting for him to speak. His team members looked weary but determined. They had just been through hell, and now they were heading into something even worse. "We've got confirmation," Xander said, his voice steady. "The Zornax Queen is launching an invasion. Earth's in danger, and we need to act fast. We're going to need all the help we can get." One of his team members, Lieutenant Harris, spoke up. "We don't have enough time to assemble a full fleet." "What do we do?" Xander clenched his fists, his mind already working through the possibilities. "We're not just fighting with ships. We fight with what we've got. Our ingenuity, our will, and our ability to adapt. We've done it before. We'll do it again." He could see the doubt in their eyes, but there was something else, too. Hope. Even after everything, the crew trusted him. They trusted humanity. And that was all they needed. Xander took a deep breath and turned toward the group of survivors in the back of the ship. They were still shaken, some of them holding each other for comfort. "We need you to stay safe. We're going to protect you, but we're going to need your help once we get back to the station." One of the survivors, a young woman with dark hair, stepped forward. "We want to help. We know our way around the station." "We can fight." Xander gave her a nod of approval. "Your courage is what will make the difference. Just stay with us and we'll get you to safety. We'll all get through this." The ship made its way back toward the station. The small group of survivors now settled in for the long journey. The stars stretched out before them, endless and indifferent. But Xander wasn't afraid. He had seen humanity at its worst and at its best. This time, he wasn't going to let anyone take it all away. The transport docked back at the station, and Xander and his team immediately began organizing a plan. They would need to intercept the Zornax before they reached Earth. If they could slow down the invasion force, maybe they could buy enough time for Earth to prepare its defenses. As they moved quickly through the station's halls, Xander couldn't help but think of Queen Jelana, the mocking words she had spoken to him, the way she had looked at him as if he were nothing. She didn't know what humanity was capable of. She thought her empire was unstoppable, but she was about to learn the truth. Xander and his team made their way to the command center, where Captain Mays was waiting. He looked up from the console as they entered, his face grim. "We've got a problem," Mays said, pointing to the holographic display in the center of the room.
"The Zornax fleet is on its way, and they're not just coming in full force. They're bringing reinforcements. We're looking at a battle we can't win without backup."
Xander's gaze flicked to the screen. The fleet was massive, easily hundreds of ships, all heading directly toward Earth's orbit. The captain was right. There was no way they could win this fight alone. But then again, humanity had never won by simply fighting alone. "Get the message out to all our allies," Xander said. "The Zornax have underestimated us before, and they're doing it again. This time, we'll show them what we're made of." Xander's voice was filled with determination. He could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him, but he also knew something else. This wasn't just about defeating the Zornax. It was about proving something to the galaxy. Humanity wasn't some fragile species waiting to be crushed. They were survivors. They had fought for every inch of their existence, and they weren't about to stop now. As the team began preparing for the upcoming battle, Xander made his way to a small room in the back of the station. It was a room he had used countless times before. A room filled with old weapons, relics from humanity's past. He walked to a storage unit in the corner, his hand resting on a weathered blade, one passed down through generations of warriors. For a moment, Xander just stood there, his fingers brushing over the hilt. The blade wasn't much. It wasn't as advanced as the weapons the Zornax used, but it was a symbol of what humanity stood for, what they had fought for. He took the blade, slipping it into its sheath at his side. It wasn't the weapon that mattered. It was the message it sent. Humanity wasn't weak. Humanity wasn't finished. They had only just begun. The command center of the space station buzzed with activity. The walls flickered with bright blue holographic displays showing the approaching Zornax fleet, now only a few hours away from Earth's orbit. Xander stood at the front of the room, his eyes fixed on the screen. His team was preparing for battle, every detail being coordinated in the frantic hours that had passed since they returned to the station. Xander could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him, but he knew this was not the time to be afraid. He had seen humanity endure before, and he was certain they would do so again. The Zornax might have been strong, but they were about to learn the hard way that strength alone was not enough to defeat the human spirit. His team, though smaller than the invading fleet, was filled with the same unshakable resolve. They were not alone. Xander had contacted every ally he could think of, reaching out to distant systems and colonies that had once been part of humanity's alliance. Some had responded, ready to stand beside Earth, even in the face of overwhelming odds.
"Xander, we're ready,"
said Lieutenant Harris, walking up beside him.
All ships are fueled, and the fighters are prepped. We're just waiting on the final word from the captain.
Xander nodded. He had no doubt the captain would be ready. There was something powerful about Earth's soldiers, their ability to fight, to adapt, to make do with whatever they had. While the Zornax relied on their overwhelming numbers and firepower, humanity had learned long ago that creativity and determination could not.
"Good," Xander said, his voice calm but firm. "Keep in touch with the other stations.
"We'll need every ship we can get."
As the minutes passed, the tension in the room grew. The crew members moved quickly, each person doing their part to prepare for the battle ahead. Xander could hear the hum of the ship's engines from down the hall, the sound of soldiers and engineers working tirelessly to ensure that the defenses were ready. Xander turned toward the holographic map of the Zornax fleet. The massive ships, glowing in bright red on the display, moved closer to Earth, heading straight toward them. The fleet was vast, over 100 ships, each one capable of obliterating entire cities with a single strike. But even so, Xander felt something rise within him, a sense of defiance. They had underestimated humanity before, and they would do so again. This time, they wouldn't be caught off guard.
"We'll need to get the first strike in," Xander said. "If we can hit them before they're fully in position, we might have a chance at slowing them down."
Harris looked at the map, nodding.
"Understood. We've got enough fighters to make a strong push."
Xander's eyes narrowed as he studied the map. There was a weakness in the Zornax formation. The enemy had placed their strongest ships in the center, surrounded by smaller vessels. It was a classic strategy. Concentrate the power in the middle, leaving the outer flanks more vulnerable. But if Xander could use their own arrogance against them, they might be able to break through.
"We'll send a small strike team to hit their weaker vessels on the edges," Xander said, his mind already working through the plan. "That will force their strongest ships to divide their forces, and that's when we make our move." Harris gave a sharp nod. "I'll get the fighters ready."
Xander stood at the front of the room, his gaze fixed on the Zornax fleet. Time was running out. They would have one shot at this. If they failed, Earth would be wide open for destruction. The Zornax thought they could wipe out humanity, but they had no idea what was coming for them. They had no idea what it meant to face a people who had nothing left to lose. An alarm sounded, cutting through the silence. The Zornax were nearing Earth's orbit, and the countdown to battle had begun. Xander's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't move. He had been in battles before, fights where victory had seemed impossible, where everything had been stacked against them. And yet, humanity had always found a way to survive. The captain's voice came over the intercom.
"Xander, it's time."
Xander took a deep breath.
"Let's show them what humanity is made of."
The fighters launched into the cold expanse of space, their engines roaring as they cut through the darkness. Xander's heart raced as he stood with his team, watching the display.
The battle was about to begin. The first wave of Zornax ships came into view, massive vessels that seemed to stretch on forever.
They were beautiful in their own way, sleek and angular, designed for maximum efficiency and power. But to Xander, they were just another obstacle, another enemy to be vanquished. The human fighter swarmed forward, small compared to the Zornak ships, but fast and nimble. They dove in and out of the enemy fleet, dodging incoming fire and retaliating with swift, calculated strikes. Xander watched as explosions lit up the dark expanse, the human ships taking out enemy vessels, one by one. But the Zornak's fleet wasn't easily intimidated. Their ships fired back with relentless force, sending waves of destruction in every direction. Xander's team had been able to hit a few of the weaker ships on the edges, but now the full force of the Zornaks was closing in.
Focus fire on the lead ship, Xander ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding in front of him.
We take down the head, the rest will follow. The human fighters regrouped, forming a tight formation as they moved toward the Zornak's flagship. The ship was enormous, its hull lined with energy shields that glowed an eerie red. But Xander had no doubt they could take it down, if they could just get close enough. The battle raged on as Xander's team pushed forward, dodging blasts and returning fire. It was a desperate, violent struggle, but humanity's fighters were determined. The Zornaks underestimated them, thinking that sheer force would win the day, but they had underestimated humanity's resourcefulness.
Fire on my mark!
Xander shouted, his fingers gripping the console in front of him.
Now!
The fighters unleashed their payload, sending a barrage of missiles toward the Zornak's flagship. The missiles hit their target with precision, piercing the ship's shields and breaking through its armor. The flagship shuddered, its systems beginning to fail as sparks flew from damaged areas. Xander's heart raced as he watched the ship falter. This was it. The Zornak's Queen's flagship was on the verge of destruction. But Xander knew they couldn't stop there. They had to finish what they had started. The remaining Zornak ships retaliated with fury, their weapons lighting up the dark expanse. But it was too late. Humanity had struck the first blow, and the momentum had shifted. The Zornaks were no longer invincible. They were vulnerable. As the final wave of Zornak's ships were taken down, Xander allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. Humanity had survived. They had proven, once again, that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how impossible the odds, they could endure. They could fight back. Xander looked at his team, their faces grim but determined. They had won, but the war was far from over. The Zornaks had learned a valuable lesson today. They had learned not to underestimate humanity. And Xander knew, deep in his bones, that this was only the beginning.